Have you ever entered an area in Garry's Mod, Gone Home, Control, or even the original Doom, and had this strange feeling of deja vu? A strange feeling that the space you occupy is somehow familiar to you, even though you have never physically been there before? Well, this is surely because these games, or parts of them at least, take place in liminal spaces. These games aren't scary and sometimes aren't even meant to be, but they can conjure up even more fear effectively through their environments. But how are liminal spaces used in video games? Well, you'd be surprised to learn that you probably inhabited a lot of liminal spaces in the games you've played without even knowing about it, like the foggy streets of Silent Hill, the solitary hallways of Doom, the Chernobyl-esque landscapes of Garry's Mod, and the abandoned streets of Half-Life 2 CD17. Actually, Control comes to mind as a perfect example of how liminal spaces are worked into the narrative and environment of a game. The ever-changing offices, brutalist architecture, and foreboding sense that something is inherently off about the rooms you enter. So, what are liminal spaces? They are known as a transitional space between two locations or states of being. So, they are all around us. Hallways, alleyways, waiting rooms. They are places that are ordinary and everyday, places we don't normally think about, but may in fact be thresholds between our world and another. Liminal spaces capture a very particular form of nostalgia, and it's interesting because this aesthetic is relatively new, but made by people on the internet who are very aware of how showing something familiar yet obsolete can steer that nostalgia and unease all at the same time. From the smooth and oddly shaped plastics of a cramped indoor play space to the warm, flat lighting of an empty office highlight the sense of nostalgia that creates loneliness when seen in an internet JPEG. These spaces should be alive, but seem devoid from any human occupancy. And what makes these spaces so unnerving is that they should be bustling with activity. Offices should be filled with people working and chatting. Malls should be packed with shoppers moving to and from. But these images, well, they make you feel alone. Although there's nothing chasing you, sometimes what isn't there is just as scary as what is. Because there should be people around, right? This is where the terror comes in. Liminal spaces work so well as a vehicle for terror because they allow your imagination to fill in the blanks of a space you're not currently in. There's an important distinction to be made between which games use liminal spaces, or a subgenre of them called the back rooms. The main distinction between the two is that liminal spaces don't have any context. The back rooms add a narrative to the experience of looking at a liminal space photo, with creatures called entities, and levels of the back rooms using different liminal spaces as their backdrops. There is nothing stalking, creeping, or chasing you in the liminal space. That's the scariest part of it. Your imagination is your greatest enemy. A great game that encapsulates perfectly the terror of liminal spaces is called Anemoiopolis. After falling through the Earth's surface, you are submerged in an underground pool, and very soon you will be asking yourself, why are there so many pools in these games? Well, community pools are places we might have spent a lot of time as kids, for swimming lessons or maybe fun at water parks. These spaces are also meant to have tons of people in them, splashing and shouting joyful cries of kids going down the water slides and whatnot. And well, removing any human interaction in these spaces is uncanny to say the least. And it all goes back to that disconnect between how you know something should look and sound and seeing it as it is. Anemoiopolis does this exceptionally well. From abandoned water slides to dingy locker rooms and back rooms of the underground water park you find yourself in. The game was so effective at capitalizing on the terror of the dimly lit hallways and eerie locations that are so enticing about the liminal spaces. Another game that I would like to speak about is called Superliminal, which it's not a horror game. It's actually a puzzle game in which it uses your perspective and environments to solve puzzles until you get to chapter 4. Up to this point in the game, the hotel hallways and Hollywood-like backlots have been uncanny, maybe even slightly unsettling at best, but they are brightly lit with no indication that anything bad or scary is happening. But in Chapter 4, they start by shutting all the lights off. The immediate change in tone is like a terrifying slap to the face. The hallways feel all the more claustrophobic. The effective use of side gags like stack of signs that say die, which then turns out to be a bunch of boxes of diet soda, using these lights of an exit signs to find your way through the back rooms of a kitchen, mountains of boxes piled up that you have to squeeze your way through, doors shut behind you, trails of blood on the floor, and bloody handprints on the walls. This sequence perfectly captures the terror of liminal spaces because it allows you to create your own greatest fears. And you may be wondering what monster was about to pop out of the shadows, what creature from another dimension was stalking you. But the truth is, there wasn't one. Those doors that swung behind you as you passed through, because that's the way they do. The blood was just red paint to paint the walls of the restaurant. And the diet soda, well, was just diet soda. I loved this reveal because it didn't feel like a cop-out, a cheap scare, or take the game into backrooms territory. Instead, it only added to the terror of the liminal spaces going forward, because my imagination was constantly spinning as to whenever I was safe or even alone in the spaces I occupied. It turned out to be an ordinary extraordinary, or at least my mind did. I don't know, this would be all I have to say. I believe these are great examples of what a liminal space is and how it can be so terrifying at times. Like in this game, liminal space, I would highly recommend it because it makes you feel at some times that something's there, that someone might go ahead and kill you or stab you in the back or something bad might happen. But it gives you this turn that nothing bad happened and that this place, this restaurant was like any other ordinary place. So I would recommend and go ahead and play it. It's really great, and I hope you like this video. Bye bye.